I call it ecological and social sustainability.
They're not just growing food for themselves, they're growing food to help those who are actually disadvantaged as well. You're like, I'm getting a little tired of this, but I still love it.
Yeah, I love it.
Let's start with who you are right now.
All right. So my name's Chelsea and I live at Moora Moora Co-op, so I live on a cooperative community with 70 other people and 600 acres on the top of the mountain. And I also manage ECOSS, and I've been here for, I think, 14, nearly 15 years.
And what is ECOSS?
And ECOSS is a community environment hub here in Wesburn. So we're on 17 acres, and it has, next year turns 20, and well, since they actually developed the master plan. But we've only had full site access probably for the last 10 years, because previously it was a factory farm for chickens, and there was asbestos in the walls, and when they got pulled down, then we had to go on a big remediation process, and the council did that. We leased it off the council because they purchased the land to, next door was the tip, and they turned the tip into a waste transfer station, luckily, so that meant that they were going to expand the tip into here, but then they didn't.
And you saved it. So what is it you guys do here?
So,
broadly speaking.
There's a lot that goes on here.
It's like education, community.
Yeah. So
if you had to say it in, if you had to put it in
a few words,
one sentence, what would you say?
Well, ECOSS
it's always tough.
Is not an acronym for something traditionally, like the way it was made, it wasn't. But I call it ecological and social sustainability.
Okay.
That's sort of our tagline, and it fits really well because, I think humans think that we can thrive just with the land and what we eat, or run into the bush in an apocalypse and live. But we need community. We need community at the foundations of everything, and so it's very clear.
And it becomes more and more clear to me every conversation I have. We're just talking with Matt down the road. Yeah. And it became so clear that at every key step in his journey, there was a community that built up, and then that influenced him, and you find your community. So you guys, you cultivate community here, you do a lot of events, and you run this essentially. You're kind of the manager.
Yeah, so we've got it's a not-for-profit organisation, and we've got a committee of management of about 10. But my role is executive officer, so I oversee all of the staff. I'm across all the projects, and I do. I guess I've really loved this job because there was a clean slate and came in and just got to dream up all of these exciting projects, and the committee were really just supportive and nearly always say yes, and then I just go about, get a grant, and then make it happen. And now there's 6 very part-time staff, so we try and ensure that everything we do offers a place for anyone in community. So we really do a lot with our local Indigenous community, especially in our education program and food relief. And then we do have so we have an Indigenous festival once a year, a multicultural festival once a year called Rhythms. There's Ngulu Festival, Rhythms of the World, Ecotopia, which is a permaculture festival, the Artisan Twilight Market, which highlights all the local food producers, and Youth Fest. So Youth Fest sort of does a lot with the LGBTQIA plus community and queer. So we've got a queer recycle fashion parade coming up, and heaps of cool stuff like that. So we make sure that there's a place for everyone in the curation of the design of the project, I guess.
And then you live on or within a cooperative.
Yeah.
Briefly explain that to me. What is that cooperative? Because I want to then come around full circle to that.
So Moora Moora Co-operative Community is 50 years old. It's one of the oldest in Australia. Yeah. And it's very rare for communities to survive actually really long unless they've got a guru.
That's one of the things that I found surprising. It's been around a long time.
And especially because we don't have any spiritual alignment really.
That's probably why it's lasted.
No, it's the opposite.
Is it really?
Yeah, communities with a guru or a common hierarchical structure are more likely to survive.
Really? Okay, because they're all in agreement. Okay, there's a boss.
And
Yeah, they're all facing the same direction.
Look at the Hare Krishnas, they do well, but but as an environmental and social experiment that it was set up, the hippies in the 70s, but or academics really. But it's still going, and that's I don't know. To me, it's the same value set as what we do here. So
right.
it's deeply embedded.
You each have a piece of land, or you each have a house and you share the land? How does it work?
Yeah, you buy a share of the entire land, and then we built a house, and so we own the house, but not the land under it. We buy a share of the land.
Okay, and then you get you all contribute. If we're going to have a vegetable garden, it's a shared vegetable garden. Yeah,
yep. And it's funnily enough, I don't actually garden myself in the community garden at Moora Moora because I'm managing a community garden here. I manage the Community Gardens Network, and I'm gardening for myself. But I am part of a share of sheep and cows, and previous to that, I was the primary farmer, and then a new guy came in and he really wanted to have a go, so I was like, yep, go for it, we'll support you.
You've got what animals, and you've got a market garden there.
So
what animals do you have as well?
We actually lease the land to a market gardener who's our friend whose property abuts ours.
Yep.
So they grow half on their property and half on our property.
Yep.
And we call it the Hort area, so it's a deer fenced area, and then there is a community garden in there as well, that Moora Moora members community garden in there. And then there's also allotment plots where there's a vineyard and blueberry plot, and I'm about to start a whole new orchard with a chook pen for meat.
Fantastic.
And so there's a lot of different...
What animals have you got? You got chickens, or you will have chickens? Well,
I haven't got chickens at the moment because the fox has got them all. That's why I need a whole new...
Foxes are regenerative too, so...
cows and belted Galloways and
cows,
sheep, Dorper sheep.
And you'll have chickens, so you'll have some meat birds and some eggs.
We also hunt venison on the property. We've got an out-of-control deer population, so we're actually eating more venison than... I actually never liked it until this week.
Venison sausages are awesome. Have you ever had venison sausages?
Yeah, you've got to put fat with it though.
Yes, they're dry, but the flavour's awesome.
So we've been getting it from the free-range pig farm, but... Yeah.
Wild pig is very good too. But anyway, we'll get to that. All right, so now we know where you are now. What I'd like to do is take you back as far as you want to go to what you consider was kind of like where you came from.
Yeah.
Because you didn't grow up here, right? You didn't grow up...
partially, I guess. So I moved to Badger Creek, which is just out of Healesville, when I was 8.
That's not far from here. That's 25
close.
minutes, something like that.
It's near Healesville, and it was like nothing. Right behind the Healesville Sanctuary we lived.
Yeah.
And, and we just had a suburban block, but my mum grew a lot of food there, and I loved it. I loved doing that, and I adjusted my horse around, and everyone had properties, in Healesville.
Yeah, I'm a horsey person.
I was a horsey person, and anyway, so I lived there till I was about 15. But my parents, I used to get babysat at Moora Moora at the co-op where I live now.
Yeah.
I never ever dreamed of living there. It was.
So in French we would say "tomber dans le marmite," which means you fell in the pot early. You remember Asterix and Obelix?
Yeah.
So Asterix, they take the magic potion. Obelix doesn't need to take it because he fell in the pot when he was a baby. He's like "tomber dans le marmite." Those big pots, those big urns, they call them a marmite.
Yeah.
And he fell in there when he was a baby, so the potion affected him permanently.
So it's there you go. I love it.
You fell into that pot and it affected you. Okay, so you were there as a young child. You were being babysit there, so you got to get a bit of a vibe for it.
Yeah, and I just think growing up rurally too, that when you are in, there was, there's built up a lot now, but it was a very rural farming community then, and still is, but so I think that that happened potentially. I never ever dreamed of living at Moora Moora. It wasn't a thing for me. But
right.
I do
Why
remember.
Not?
I don't know how many people dream of living in the place they grew up. But you have bigger visions and.
Okay.
But I do remember. I'm sort of reflecting now on the journey, and there was a time in India. I was there when I was 18, and I was like in this ashram, and I did write this big piece after this big 10-day meditation, and it was like, I'm going to move and live on a community with chickens, and and I found that years later. But I ended up living in Japan and for a few years, and I was working at Friends of the Earth and doing a lot of forest campaigning, trying to stop the Daishowa, were the main importers of Australian wood chips.
Yep.
And I'd been doing a lot of forest campaigning before that, but when I was there, I'll never forget, this asshole said to me, "What would you know? You don't even have a degree."
Oh.
And yeah, I mean, I'd been travelling all of my late
yeah,
teens.
and everybody knows that they're unless you're doing even engineering now. Elon Musk says he doesn't care whether people have an engineering. It doesn't even ask them anymore.
Yeah.
He just says, "Show me what you can do. Show me what you've worked on." I don't care.
I know, exactly. That's how I would operate.
Most of them are useless.
But I was really belligerent. I was like, "Oh well."
Of course, you're going to study vet or
I'm going to go
medicine,
and get myself one. So
so you went and got one?
I enrolled. No, I did it, and I came back to Australia.
Did you feel that it was worth it in the end?
Oh, well, the first one, so I did natural resource management, and that was a diploma at TAFE, and it was 2 years, mostly camping. I just loved it.
Right.
I absolutely loved it. And in that, you do, during that course, it's natural resource management, so it's lots of pest and animal plant management, horticulture, farming, everything.
Wonderful.
But, and protecting endangered wildlife and geology and, soils and all that stuff. And that was sort of a really good foundation. And then I wanted more, so enrolled in environmental science and conservation biology, but I didn't finish those degrees because then I had a partner who had a bad motorbike accident and I had to leave and become his carer.
Where was that? Where were you living at that point?
I was living in a big mansion in Kangaroo Ground on 20 acres with 15 people, a massive party house. And
so not a communal thing, just like a whole bunch of people, just party people.
Yeah, well, we were like a community.
Okay.
We cooked together, and I started a massive veggie garden there, and
Excellent.
it's like So that was very, very, very fun days. But so I left, and then actually what happened was Ollie had this motorbike accident and couldn't work, and so I couldn't work. I had to look after him, so I had no money. And the caretaker's position came up at Moora Moora, and I knew about it because I'd ran in the election for the Greens and been part of this. I started an environment group in Healesville, and half of the members of Moora Moora were part of that environment group, and so I was in contact with them and doing Greens election stuff. And then, so we got the caretaker's job.
This is where the rubber often meets the road, is that we all love the idea of this bucolic, very simple existence, but there are times in life where it would be really helpful to have a good cash flow. Yeah. Not because you're greedy, not because you want a third Rolex, but maybe because someone you love is sick and needs medical care and you could use some help. This is why it's what we talk about, why I help people with business models, because what was his name? What's the name? The lead singer of Van Halen. What was his name? Not Eddie Van Halen, the other guy. They had a song, Van Halen had a song where he goes, "I've been rich and I've been poor, rich is better, so much better." I'm not saying you have to want to be rich, but I think whatever you do, and especially if you're a farmer, if you want it to be sustainable, you have to have cash flow. You have to have enough to say it's okay, we can, So you find yourself in this difficult situation, you're looking after your partner, badly injured from the sounds of it, and you need some cash.
There was a long period of time there. So I had 3 children.
So you're running ECOSS at this point, or not?
No.
Not ECOSS, I beg your pardon. The Cooperative, because you said when he had the accident, then you got the opportunity.
Then we moved there and became the caretakers. Yes. So it was just doing, and Ollie had been in a wheelchair and had just gotten out. And so he was getting more physically able, but then had years of surgeries apart from that. So I had to do a lot, I guess. And then... had kids and wanted to go back to work. So I think I came here in 2000 and I don't know years. I have this sort of mental block, but 14 maybe.
Okay.
Whatever is 15 years ago.
15 years ago. So what are we, 26? So 11.
That's when I came. So, and there was no employees here. So I started out at 2 hours a week, employed to go through the memberships, and I found it really boring.
So that whole time you were at the Cooperative?
I wasn't working.
You weren't working, but you were the caretaker.
Food. Yeah. Then I got pregnant a year into it, and then we moved into this dump. And whilst building a house. So we built a straw bale house. And,
that's lovely.
Yeah, so that, you know, but we lived for 8 years in a shit heap. And then, so there's a lot of practical stuff going on, a lot of rendering and, you know, earth. I love it, actually. I love it. Yeah, so, yeah,
nothing is
and then,
quite as peaceful as a home with rammed earth or any sort of earth walls.
Yeah.
There's like a stillness in them. Yeah, love them. Yeah.
Well, you see if you come up to Moora Moora, I'll show you.
I will. I'll probably come back up and do another one and hopefully interview Tobias and come up to Moora Moora. But
yeah, it's only 25 minutes away.
So you're doing that, and then
they called me to. I used to put on festivals, and I had a bit of a reputation for it, I guess. So that I got a call from a guy here that I didn't know. I didn't know this place to put on a festival. So that was my first job here. And because of the asbestos on site, we realised that it just wasn't going to be remediated in time. And so we planned to put it on in the middle of Yarra Junction. And then we did that for like 10 years, actually, and it's backbreaking. I could never do it again. But it brought the entire community into the fold, like, really. And it's in this parklands where there's, like, Ben's shared the museum and all the cohorts of different people. So, and we made it an environment festival, like, all around permaculture.
That's an interesting example of something that I hear a lot is... there was this really frustrating thing that happened. But actually, in hindsight... Yeah,
it was the best thing.
It was the best thing, right? Suddenly you find yourself in a situation where everybody learns about you. You know, if you were doing it here, you'd be begging people to come.
That's right.
So I think that's a great example of what happens when you just embrace... and you can only do it for a while, as you say, because at some point it's just too much, but it has a season. And
But that example perfectly fits sort of what actually happened next. So doing these events, and we had this really cranking nursery here.
I'm just checking the camera. So you had a really cranking nursery.
We had a really cranking nursery. So it was an edibles nursery.
And you're not doing events here. So, and by the way, with the remediation, what did they have to do? Did they have to, like, earthworks, dig it all up? Wow,
dig up the whole... You know, those sheds are... hundreds of metres long, and
all had to come out,
all the soil. Yeah, it costs a lot of money and took a lot of time. They didn't do it well enough the first time, so they had to do it a second time. And so it was a long period of waiting for us. Okay. And so we couldn't access the site.
But in the meantime, you're doing these events.
In the meantime, doing festivals and trying to organise workshops and, just other little things like that. But we needed a social enterprise, so we developed a edibles nursery, and it was organic, and we got this big order.
We're not talking about little edible jelly babies here. We're talking about edible
fruit and veg. Yeah, not fruit, veg.
If you say edibles in America, it's a different thing.
Party
it's
time.
Just for the American audience. Edibles means a whole other thing sometimes.
Fun, if only. No, no. But what happened is we got a big order. We were inexperienced. We delivered the order, and they never paid. And so we'd actually built up, a good system that enabled us to have employees, but then we had no money.
So hang on, take me through that one for a sec. Who was this person, and what had they ordered, and what happened? Because there's probably a business structure lesson in there. So what happened? Just very briefly, what happened? Somebody said, "I'll take 100 of these."
Yeah, an organics farm.
Yes.
I can't say the name.
No.
I'm
happy for you to, but
placed a $50,000 order. $50,000 order, and they ended up drip feeding it. We went through a VCAT process, and but it just meant we couldn't keep the staff on. But what was happening with the committee of management at the time was the entire focus of this place was going to running this business, and people were like, I'm actually not here for that. I'm here for the vision, and here's this amazing permaculture vision of this incredible property.
Beautiful view.
And we're managing the ins and outs of this business.
And over what period did this take place, from the point
Probably
of the order to the point where they reneged?
5 years, so, yeah.
So what point was that where they reneged? Did they pay for a while and then they reneged?
Yeah, so it wasn't just them. Like, we were supplying quite a lot, and we had a retail nursery at the front and a wholesale nursery at the back here, where we could access. And, and it would have been very profitable and very good, but it was too young. The vision here was much greater than just running a nursery, and yet it was absorbing all the resources when we had so little. And
how do you think you got off your vision so easily?
Money, trying to make money, and I think that now we're running we'll be growing 20,000 tubes this year easily, maybe 30. With no worries, and we can hold it. We can hold it with the diversity of what's going on here, because there's so much more investment into so many different areas. Each has its value that's holding its own. So, but then we didn't have anything to show. We didn't have any site co-locators or any community backing for what we were doing. It just looked like a business.
Yeah, and that's why I say, ironically, being sent to go and do stuff in the community suddenly gives you credibility.
Yeah.
There's a big part of credibility and brand is authentic interaction with people. So the authentic part's important, right? Like you said, if you're doing something, this is what happened. That's why I'm digging into it a little bit, is that what happened with you is a classic business mistake. If you study, business as a sort of review it academically, right? You look at businesses as business studies, okay? There are several types of very common mistakes that businesses make that all centre around something that seems like a good idea but is not aligned with the vision or the mission or the long-term goal. So they're kind of like low-hanging fruit, a temptation, right? You might have bought this piece of land, you say, we have a plan to go from here to there in the next 2 years, right? And at the end of that 2 years, we'll be ready to do this and that and that. And you map it all out. And you have to be adaptable. But what people often do is somebody will come along and go, well, I know we have this plan, but there's somebody here that's offering to do this, and it'll bring in this much money, and I'm sure it'll help us get there more quickly. What happens in practice almost all the time is that because you're doing something that's no longer aligned with that vision and goal, some people will quietly start to lose heart because they'll say, that's not what I signed up for. The actual experience will be different to what you expected. Well, I thought we were going to be doing this, and then we were going to be rejuvenating the paddocks, but now I'm taking phone calls from people about their late order, and so it seems at the time of the decision like how could it hurt? It's only got to be good, even though hang on, we're steering the ship towards Madagascar, right? And you're saying just 1 degree to the right, there's this island that's got really nice mangoes and stuff, right? And what happens is that 1 degree, you miss Madagascar. And it happens all the time. And there's different versions of it, but essentially it all comes down to either not having an alignment, a vision and a strategy, or allowing yourself to be tempted off the path. And before you know it, it's kind of like getting off the bus to go and do something quickly. The bus moves on without you. The opportunity somehow just moves on without you. So I'm not surprised that it's not uncommon that something like that happens, that it's good for a while and then it starts to and you don't have the resilience baked in because you're now steering off here when everybody wanted to go there. So all of that is to say,
absolutely,
it's not unusual.
And I think that, no, I'm with you. I really feel that, but I also know that, like, when you're a not-for-profit and you're not looking to be a business, and you're grasping at the grants, and so there's lots of small deviations that have ended up being good things as well. Like there's,
but they're all aligned with the.
How do they align with our purpose? How do they align with the vision? That's right. I'm not.
That's it. That's the trick. That's the catch. Not because they'll all fail, but because the ones that are aligned are far more likely to succeed and add value. And much easier to get people to engage in because, okay, it's not exactly what we had in mind, but it still aligns with what we were doing. Versus, well, look, I know we weren't going to do animals, but there's a great opportunity to raise 50,000 eggs and it's going to make $100,000 a month for the community. And then you find out the community just doesn't really care. So it's all of which is to say it's not unusual. So find yourself in that situation, that stops, that ends, turns out to be a dead end. The island of the mangoes. I always have crazy metaphors. And even I say to people, like, that makes no sense, does it? They go, we understand what you meant. Like, I'm always like, it's kind of like a Chinaman riding a bicycle across India. But we get the idea. You kind of steered away to the island. Oh, crap, that was a bad idea. We missed Madagascar. So often what happens in business, when you study business, is that Madagascar opportunity kind of evaporates, and then you kind of have to refine a new something. So what happened in your case? Did you manage to or did it have to be something new?
Well, there's a lot happening simultaneously, I'd say. It's not like that was our only thing going on. You know, I've continually been applying for more grants, and then I think actually probably lockdown was funnily a gift for us, because you think what happened at the first week of lockdown is that we decided to start a weekly produce market, and we got permission to do it and the reason was because Tobias and Josh had all this produce, and they couldn't sell it like to the restaurants and everything, and then
there's another one of
a whole
those.
Bunch of other people went, well, I've got all this produce I need to sell, and then a whole bunch of other people are like, I don't want to be in a stinky supermarket with, you know, my mask on.
Yeah.
And everyone,
doing,
you know,
and
have them have the monopoly. So it was edgy. And we did get some backlash. People were going, "Why are you starting a public event during the first week of lockdown?" But it was outside, and we went by those rules, and we got council permission because it actually was supporting a lot of producers. So that was the start of the produce market, and that was, you know, fitting in alignment with the goals, and it didn't bring us money. But
see what I'm saying, though?
Yeah.
But it was aligned. The other thing, it's very easy to say, is just, you kind of go, like, it's good, but it's not really aligned.
Yeah.
Maybe we should ask Bob next door or Martha if they want to do
square peg,
it.
round hole thing.
Just a little bit. You just know.
Yeah.
Whereas what you just talked about with the market and getting everybody together, that is a correction, which is what everybody should do with business plans, constantly be adjusting and, well, you know, I mean, chickens are a great example. Bird flu. Or, so first there's bird flu, you've got to shift your market, which is why it's important to have resilience in different products. But then, after the bird flu, there's this huge increase in everybody doing eggs in the regenerative space, in the free-range space, because the commercial ones were all shut down. Now the commercial ones come back online, and there's a glut. So right now there's a glut on eggs. And so you need to have alignment to be resilient. So you start this cooperative market.
Weekly produce market. Something we always were going to do. It's just we hadn't gotten there because we didn't have the...
but it happened in a way you weren't expecting.
It happened in that way. And then during lockdown, we still worked through from home, but it gave us time to develop programs and procedures and get the website better and do all that admin-y stuff that we never had time to do.
I know all about that stuff.
So we developed Crops for Community program, and that was really popular with grants back then. It was like hitting everyone's targets, and so we got quite a lot of money. Plus the government was just handing out money left, right and centre. It was not...
It's good to hear that they were handing it to these kinds of projects. Do you feel that the lessons that you learned when you were doing the sort of commercial farming, do you feel like that developed a lot of skills that then became useful at this stage, or was it really just a big waste?
No, because the staff were gone. It was a different...
So it really was a bit,
and we had, for the nursery, we had employed a business manager who had this incredible resume, and he'd been all through Southeast Asia raising not-for-profits above the line, and, you know... But
just didn't. Okay, see, not aligned in the right place, and you go one block over, and it makes sense. To me, it's just I used to think that was very fluffy. For me, business was always about seek the opportunities. It's not. It's about a steady hand on the tiller and just you need to navigate, but you do it. By choice, not by opportunity. So you've got this market now, and COVID.
And then we've developed, and we needed to. I really wanted to develop a program that and ensure that reconciliation action with our local Indigenous people was at the centre of everything we were doing.
Yep.
So there was a Cooperative Community program trying to grow food for food relief to them, and also a local pay-as-you-feel cafe. So we were supporting 2 different cohorts in that. People really liked that idea, and the funding's sort of gone a bit awry for that. But for now, we've got all these, there's about 50 or 60 people living with disabilities that come every week and garden in that garden.
I'm really interested in that because a lot of people, I suspect, think I'm too old, I have a disability.
No.
I don't know where to start. This is where I'm a big believer in structures and systems, because if you give me somebody who's really good, like you said, this business manager is, he's really good at what he does, but you don't have the systems in place and the business plan and the vision carefully aligned. I'd rather have somebody who is just okay but has really good systems to follow. We agreed on the system. It's Wednesday. That's supposed to be done by Monday. I don't care about your art. Okay. This is where systems are important, because systems everybody can agree on. So but so getting to the people with the disabilities, what prompted that, and how does that work in practice? Because I love that. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. Inclusion prompted that. Looking at, we're doing all these different programs. We've got Upcycles, bicycle upcycling for youth. I mean, it's for everyone, but it's a really good youth mentorship program going on. We've got pottery for artists. We've got art therapies for people living with disabilities. Anyway, it was another cohort that we could do something for, or create a sense of place and purpose for. And also knowing that people living with disabilities are always just traditionally, and things are changing a lot now for them, have been really sedentary.
Horrible,
stuck,
it's the worst thing of all the people who shouldn't be sedentary. It's people who've got disabilities, or they need
stuck inside, and it's a pretty miserable existence. I did some care work in the past, and really found it disturbing, and the shit that they were being fed, and I just. Anyway, so it was about also inviting people living with disabilities into a public place so that other people have a chance to interact with them who may never get to. Because remember, people with disabilities used to be locked away in Kew cottages, and
absolutely.
I never interacted with many growing up. People with serious intellectual or physical disabilities. But anyway, so we designed it, and we've made accessible garden beds and pathways, and over time got funding for those sort of things to make it easier for them to attend. But it was also about celebrating people who live with disabilities, what they can do, because they're growing food for food relief. So they're actually being
they're not just growing food for themselves, they're growing food to help those who are actually disadvantaged as well. So it's the next level. It's not just that they're getting out of the house or looking after themselves, actually looking after others.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and they know what they're doing. Most of them, I'd say, that attend know what they're doing, and get a sense of real satisfaction out of it. So it brings so much joy to the site, because they're coming from different organisations. But the other thing that's happening now with all these individual NDIS packages and carers or support workers coming along with their participants, that they're often really isolated and lonely and don't have a way to interact with other people. So this is a place where they can just rock up and come and join in, and they will then over time get to know. And they've created a full community. So every year when we have our celebration here, there's probably about 60 or 70 people from all different, service organisations or NDIS suppliers. They have a massive party. They love to sing and get up on the stage and set up the stage.
Karaoke.
And, a barbecue. And,
I love that. When I talk to people about farming, regenerative farming, I think people who are looking to transition into that, it starts off from a place of they have a genuine need of some sort, like my life is not giving me enough. I know that I want to be around animals, I want to be around plants, I want to get away from the noise a bit. But it almost always ends up in various ways becoming a positive force in the community. If it's just a farm and they're just feeding people, and now the town has grown by 5 people, and that might be the difference between the town dies and the town lives, and they get to know people, and they, you know, as you talk to them over the years, they say, oh we shot a deer and we dropped some venison off to Mrs. Jones down the way, and you realise it's stuff that you just don't do in the city. You don't stop by a neighbour's place and drop them off anything, because they're just, the supermarket's there, I'll go and buy. You know, it's
depressing.
It's a personal transition. You come. It's not just like what's the right word for it? It's a holistic. I know that word's overused, but it's a whole of person, whole of universe transition when somebody starts to get into regenerative farming. Animals change the way you think. Farming changes, vegetables changes the way you think. Being part of a smaller community where you're suddenly aware that you have to think about how you treat people, because you're going to see them tomorrow. You know, it changes who you are, but all of it's for the better. You never hear of people moving to farming or whatever, and then say, he turned into a real shit after that, But that happens when they go to the city. Do you know what I mean?
That's interesting, isn't it?
It's never a negative thing. It's never a... they might become the sort of person that likes to spend a lot of time alone or something. But I don't ever hear of cases where you say, oh, this person left the city for a rural or coastal lifestyle and became a less nice person.
Yeah. I think, we always talk about that, have you watched Alone, the series of Alone? Basically, everyone pulls out of Alone. It's when they go and, like Alone Australia in Tassie, and you get plonked in the middle of nowhere and you have to try and survive.
Oh, and you have to survive for how long? And it's until the last person who can survive.
Well, they nearly all come out because of loneliness. They don't come out because they're starving necessarily. I think most of them are lonely, or they have a story to tell. And I think that we are so disconnected from the reality that it's community is part of an essential need. It's part of our need,
100%.
It's
100%.
very much so.
100%. And I think what the city does, in my observation, is it's all about surrogates. You don't need a family. We've got the nightclub and the bar. You don't need brothers and sisters to play with. We've got the sports club. You don't need to have conversations with people about whatever. You can watch a film. It's all these... you don't need to cook food. Here's something ready-made. Everything is like a replacement, a substitute, a cheap substitute, but it's easier.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, do you really want to go and shoot a deer and hang a deer and... these sausages are $5 for a dozen. Yeah, exactly. Just don't ask where they came from, right?
But it's soul destroying.
It is.
And, it is. As opposed to soul enriching. I was contemplating just the other night about, because I do pottery. So I set up the pottery studio totally out of self-interest here as a not-for-profit, because I love doing pottery. Doing it for the community. Only because I really want to do it.
Yeah. But, why are all the stools at your height? Don't ask.
So anyway, we... revere clay, and then on the side, over all these years, I've actually been a doula, so working with birth and death.
Yes.
So the birth doulaing turned into death doulaing after some deaths at births, and then ended up, and so I've been contemplating about soils, because that's, what I do in my free time, like how, in art, we're, revering the clay, and you don't really want the topsoil obviously in there, but topsoil is life and death.
100%.
And it's exactly what it is.
It's the earth's life, it's our life.
Yeah, and
it's the plant's life, it's the animal's life.
It's death, it's mycelium, it's life. Yeah. It's life and death. And I just was like, wow, it's just the fully essential element of that we need to interact with to probably have a whole life.
And our mutual friend Ram was telling me in the car on the way up that with Biodynamics, one of the things that he learned was that when you try to grow seed in compost, you're trying to grow a living thing in a dying thing. that you need to take the compost down to the point where it becomes soil, where it's finished dying, finished composting, then that's topsoil, and that's what you should be growing in.
Yeah.
So with organics and things like that, when you're growing, adding a lot of compost, actually what you're trying to do is grow a living thing out of a substance that is still in the process of dying. Isn't that fascinating?
That is really interesting. Isn't Ramana a very wise man?
He's a clever thing. I don't know where he is, but I'm sure I have a feeling that he knows what we're saying.
Well, I actually met Ram because I did my doula course with Ed.
There you go.
Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah.
So I have a theory that, and sort of coming clearer in my mind, I was just thinking about it when we were talking before, that everybody who lives in the city is on a journey out of the city. Some people make it, some people don't, and the ones who make it at different times. But I actually think that we all know that we don't belong in the city. We would all rather be on the land near the coast. And even I talked to coastal people. I interviewed a guy a couple of weeks ago, and he was a surfer and everything. And I said, do you miss the surf? Because you say to a surfer, you're going to go and live in 2 hours from the surf. And like surfers are like, the ocean is their lifeblood.
There. Yeah.
And he said, the more I got into organic farming and regenerative farming, I just didn't miss the ocean anymore. I just wanted to be on the... That's saying something, because that's a quite... to take a lifelong surfer away from the ocean. And I think I'm coming to the conclusion more and more that everybody is actually on a journey, and I think that's why a lot of people retire to the country or retire down the coast. They finally feel like, well, I've got everything lined up, the money and everything and the pension, and they finally have the courage to go and do something that deep in their heart and their soul and their spirit, they probably wanted to do their whole life.
Yeah.
But the city came along and said, but there's this restaurant and there's this film and there's this fashion thing, and everybody will be so impressed if you wear that new dress, and it messes with our minds. But when people are calm, and we were just talking to Matt from Peace Farm before, and he was talking about how he went off hiking in Tasmania for weeks and weeks and almost died on top of a mountain, and then he was sitting in this amphitheatre in this sort of forest where they'd set up this educational centre, and you just walk in and it plays a video for you. And he said he described a thunderbolt going through. So he was sitting there watching it by himself in the forest, and he said he described like a thunderbolt going through his body with no pain, but it was like, and he went, I'm going to go and be organic regenerative farmer. From... He was sort of working at Sirius, like this before Sirius, so he was into garden design and things like that. But he said it was like he just went bonk, and he would. From that second on, he had no doubt whatsoever, and he just went clunk into his lane.
He already had embedded skills too, like from he already had a lot of skills, and But it's that thing of. He aligned with what he knew he wanted, but he had to, in his case, that's what it took for him. It took for him to climb up to the top of a mountain, almost freeze to death, and then come back down and then be like, and you're sort of spent, and then that's when you hear what you need to hear. Has anything like that happened for you? Has there been like a low point where you... I just think that that annoying man in Friends of the Earth in Tokyo... and I hated living in Tokyo. I really talk about city. Like I really didn't cope. I'd never really lived in a big city, and I really struggled there because of the lack of ability to meet anyone that I could identify with, and also
that's a big problem for the Japanese as well. They have people just killing themselves. They have people that just get up and walk away, and you never see them again. They have a big problem with. I think Japan's a fascinating place. The people are fascinating. The culture's fascinating because it grew up as this whole other thing. I
worked at Shinjuku Station for a while, selling jewelry, and at night it just turns into that box city. And I could speak Japanese, so I was speaking to people, and there was no problem with that. That's actually where I met the nicest people. But that wasn't. I only worked there for a short while. But But
it didn't.
No.
Yeah.
No, I needed to get out. So I did. I went and worked, more that they call rurally. For me, it was like a big city still, in Machida. But I think that was it actually shook me because I'd never felt a lack of community around me until then. And I think it.
So in your case, a lot of people, they discover community. You'd always had it.
Yeah.
And then it took discovering what it's like not to have community for you to appreciate what you had. Because you said earlier, I didn't, when you were being babysat on the community, I said, well, did you already know then? And you said, well, you don't think about, this is what I want for the rest of my life when you're living it.
Yeah.
Well, that was interesting because when you talk about Japan and suddenly realising that there's a lot of people, but there's a lack of that community that you could engage with, that's probably what it took for you to appreciate what you had there, because you didn't know that you were in this situation that was right for you, that was perfect for you. You had to go out of it and go like the prodigal son, and come back and go, Dad, I'm sorry, I'll feed the pigs for the rest of my life, take me back. Yeah. It's a bit like that story of, you sometimes you have to go away from a good thing to appreciate that good thing.
Yeah.
Do you think that's true for you?
Yeah, I think so. And, I travelled a lot and I'd been gone a long time, and it was also time to go home. It was that, I don't know, we all reach an age where you need a home, and I really got that, in the share house, in the mansion with, everybody. We had heaps of fun, and it was a home, and it really...
But what's interesting is that's the kind of home you wanted.
Yeah.
Right? Other people would say, it's time for me to go home. To Turak. Because that's you know what I mean? But for you, it's like, your idea of home was, I want community around me. And you have surrounded yourself with community. Yeah. You live in a community. Yeah. You work in a community. You work for a community. You have stacked communities on communities.
I know too many people. There's too many birthdays. I'm like, I struggle. I think some people...
By the time you're 90, you walk past and people go like, hey, Jay,
leave me alone.
Happy birthday.
No, I love it. I thrive on it. I really do. And, Rick, who's the president here, he always, he's amazing. He's involved in all these different community organisations, and often when I see how much I'm asking of him, or what, I'm just giving him a list of things to do that day, and he always says he gets way more out of it than he gives, and I definitely do too. Yeah, I definitely do. It's a lot. It is a lot of people to interact with every single day. Yeah, yeah. But I do love it.
You can see it in your eyes. Still. You're like, I'm getting a little tired of this, but I still love it.
Yeah, I love it. And I enjoy, festivals and events, and I love all the, actually interact with people you wouldn't necessarily. That's what I love.
That's what I'm enjoying too. I'm talking with people that, what I love about it is that when you get involved in the right community for your nature, your interests, whatever, you find out that you've got something to offer that community. I feel like I've got something to offer this community, and that's a good feeling. It's not something, I don't necessarily want to be filming stuff and editing all the time. I'd like to be riding my horse right now, but I feel like there's not the point I'm making is that you don't always want to be doing that thing that you feel fulfills you, but there's this sense of belonging and purpose, and that you've got something to contribute that I think
absolutely.
You sort of go, well, I'm actually like a useful worm here. I can help this compost heap.
Isn't that the so?
That's one of my crazy metaphors again.
You can hug this compost.
Like a worm, worm in a compost heap. It's totally. Like a worm on cement.
You know what you're doing.
You know what I mean? In the city, no good. But you put a worm in the country, and suddenly they contribute their little part. Yeah, terrible. I told you they're weird.
No, I get it. I really I like visuals. I'm going with them. I think that, but my train of thought then was, as you were saying that, that retired men are the most at risk of suicide.
Oh, yeah.
And, I can see why, because you've lost your purpose, and we all need a purpose to feel valued, or that we have a sense of value. That's why I say volunteering. A lot of our volunteers are retired. And, I think it actually, I'd do it I do it because I think it's really good for mental health.
And in a world where big families are not as common anymore, you know, when I was a kid, when my parents were still together, it was cousin so-and-so's birthday and uncle such and such, and we're going to your cousin's place on Saturday, and then there was the cousins, but they're not really your cousins. They're just so close to your family that you call them cousins, you call them uncles and aunties, but they're not. This is a very French thing. You know, the French, the Italians and Greeks, they all do that. That's like, you know, I have lots of people I grew up with that was like uncle this and auntie that. They're not actually my uncles, but our families have known each other for 6 generations. So, you know, it's like you're
probably related somewhere.
That's it.
I'm French
absolutely
too,
related. Absolutely. There you go. Absolutely related, and you can see it just from looking at us. And they, any one of the older kids can tell any one of the younger kids what to do, and we just accept it, but like it's an older brother. And when you take that away, I think that's one of the things that some Anglo cultures like Australia, where we've got a lot of work to do, is that we develop this very hyper-individualistic culture. And then and again, as I say, in the city, that's fine, because are you feeling lonely? There's a movie, there's a bar, there's a this, there's a that. You can go to a bar, get drunk, sleep with someone, and you'll be fine. When what you need is, it's your cousin's birthday on Saturday, and we're all going to hang out in somebody's back garden and have a drink. And
well, there's a lot of dysfunctional setups happen because of that separation, I think. But the more intact cultures, definitely, like you know, look and
what sort of dysfunctional things do you think? Like just some brief examples.
With separation of family structures. Like I'm just looking at our Indigenous communities, and now there's been through stolen gen and all of that separation of how much damage has been broken. It's broken, and now they're just really rallying really hard to reform those family connections. And you always hear people go, relating to what mob you are, and then. I love that. It's like it's really getting that identity back and regathering those pieces. And I think it's happened with, like you said, with white coloniser, communities have become so fractured and drug and alcohol abuses and all those sort of things. It's really
I love almost everything about Australia. So I'm not saying that I think and my family sort of, we're expats from all over the world. My dad's French Mauritian, my mum's English, Scottish, Mauritian. I've got all these different, I've lived all over. I'm not poo-pooing Australia, quite the contrary.
I
love Australia.
didn't hear that.
But I think there is an aspect of Australia's like this, America's like this, depends on where you go, but California and places like that. England can be like that. Very kind of, we've lost our sense of family. It all used to be about family and cousins.
I agree with you.
And when you don't have that, to put a positive spin on it, when you have that, it doesn't matter what people think about you.
Yeah.
I imagine an Indigenous kid or, a recent immigrant or anything like that, if they're just the one of 3, then they feel really sort of alone and left out. Yeah. But if they're one of hundreds, that's okay. I've got my mob. Yeah. You can think what you want to think. That's cool. You're not, and you're not alone.
Yeah, I agree.
We'll save the world. I think what I was
trying to say was, I do agree with you, but there has been a good generation or so of fracture. Yeah. So a lot of people wouldn't be excited about hanging out with their cousins or mob.
That's it.
But when we really heal that, the Burmese community are going through that in Moora at the minute, because the first generation Burmese were farmers, and they're out there and they're strawberry picking and they're doing it for nothing, like pittance, and their kids have grown up here and they know how to use computers and they can get a good job, and they don't want to go on farm. So it's. Yeah, and it's created an issue where the parents can't relate to the kids because they've grown up in a different culture they think they're indulged or whatever, and the kids can't relate to the parents, and it's a really interesting scenario.
And this is what I think, where I think an opportunity lies, is to provide. I think a lot of rural opportunities seem. To people from the city, like it's not a good enough lifestyle. You know, like, why would I give up my job making $150,000 a year in my Mercedes to come and live on 5 acres and grow enough vegetables to survive? So you need to offer them something where you say, well, what if you had 200 acres and a thriving regenerative farm and you can afford a Mercedes, maybe not a... You know, like, but, you know, you can have a good life and you can send your kids to a good school.
I feel tired, though. I'm hearing this because I know what it takes to farm.
It's a business.
It's so hard to get
It's so hard.
One thing, like, you know, we've had crops just wiped out by crickets.
Yep.
You know,
Hail.
what do you do about crickets?
Yep. But what you do is you have to build in resilience. And this is where you have to have, in my opinion, from a lot of study of this seriously over 10 years, but before that, it's either like the, you know, Jean-Martin Fortier, like,
so that's what
super
Tobias
intense,
does,
like Tobias, bam,
but
bam.
it's diversity. You have to have diversity.
And you're on that thing and you're crushing that thing, or you need to go 150, 200 acres. You need to have cattle, meat birds, egg birds, and then anything else. Because if you've got those, you'll be okay. If the eggs aren't saying that much, you've got broilers. If, you know, if there's a problem, you've got cattle. You need resilience. I think what a lot of people do is they don't build in enough resilience. And like you say, you get hail or you get locusts or you get something. It's their one thing.
Have you seen Polyface?
Yes.
And Vandana Shiva, and she says it very well in there. I think, you know, that.
The documentary?
Yeah, with Deepak Chopra and Vandana Shiva. They're talking about polyface farming, so...
I thought you were talking about Joel Salatin's polyface farm?
No.
Or no?
Well,
okay.
It's called...
But Joel Salatin's farm is called Polyface?
Yeah.
Yes, so you're talking about having multiple things that you do.
Yeah.
100%.
And, you know, and perhaps some are not even, you know, your primary, you know... Obviously, you grow for the chooks.
That's it.
You grow for the chooks. You make sure the chooks are healthy. You grow for the goats.
Here's my theory. Tell me what you think. If you want to look for for examples of resilient farming models, look at how people farmed 100, 200 years ago.
Yeah.
When it was still the modern world, you know, they weren't barefoot in the highlands, right? They had shoes and everything, but look at what people were doing 100 years ago in the country, because they had to survive without the local town nearby, without the local... One of my business partners in another business, he grew up near Bairnsdale, and when he was a kid, they used to spend half a day trekking up to their cousin's farm from Bairnsdale, from... sort of the town of Bairnsdale, which is on the Gippsland coast. They'd go, and he said it was basically a day to get there, half a day to get there, half a day to get back, just up over the hill, and that's where his cousins lived, and they lived there, and they thrived there. If you look at, then you can ask yourself, well, how? They didn't even have modern medicines. Somebody broke their leg. It was fix it. You know, somebody's tooth was rotten, fix it. How did they... What happens if people don't want your produce? What happens if locusts come through? And the way they did it, from my observation, is they were a bit diversified. They like you said, veggies weren't their thing. They did mostly cattle, but they also had some veggies and some chooks and some this and some that, because if something happened to the cattle, there was a flood or whatever, they weren't wiped out. They were able to sort of...
I just got back from Africa, and I've been in went out with some farmers who are working rurally. So they're French, because we're French
expats.
Working with the embassy. So one of them was a young vet and another young agriculturalist, and they're like really 9 hours across the savannah in the middle of nowhere, living in the middle of, like, you know, nowhere, and they're implementing these methods. So, but it's a whole resilience protocol, basically, where, you know, putting beehives around the crops so that the elephants don't destroy the crops, so no one
because the bees attack the elephants.
It was more around stopping poaching. So people are poaching elephants getting angry. They're going into the villages angry. And you don't want that. You want to live in harmony.
So they put bees...
Elephants don't like bees. Put bees around the crops.
That's
elephants don't eat the crops. And then they put marimas in with the goats So even, I mean, while we were there, actually a lion ate all these little goats in this thing, but they're going to put, and they're trialling in other areas, Marima's in with the goats, so the Marima's set off an alarm system.
I mean, lions is like next level predator to be fair. Like,
but they get scared off by dogs.
They get scared off because they're big dogs. They get,
So they'll get, yes, and then it'll sound an alarm at least, and then people can come out. But they, want to stop the poaching of the lions. And really trying to recreate a more harmonious system that's more resilient. But because of that, then they've got a honey business.
And they're not in the honey business. They're in a regenerative farm or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But they also have a honey thing, and they also have this.
Yeah.
And if a Varroa mite comes through and it takes out half their hive for a year or two, that's okay because they're not
they never
honey farmers. That's it. It's the resilience, and that's a brilliant example of.
It was amazing.
Extreme resilience. I'm going to get the name. What's the name of that farm?
Oh, it's not a farm. That's like us in Lusaka, in Zambia. It's just a village. Like, you drive through, there's a village here and a village there. And it's near a place called Itezi, which is like, it's 9 hours from Lusaka in... There's a place there that they've got a hydro power station, and because they load shed across all of Africa, so that's where they run a whole lot of power to Kenya.
So there's some jobs? Not really.
Very poor.
But they've built resilience. Staying on the topic, they've built resilience.
Well, this is they're trying. So these are French, because the French government screwed over everybody, and we all know that. I'm French too. They so all the projects they put in, and never.
They don't do that anymore. Not
so
in Africa.
Got people working on the border,
especially not in Northern Africa.
No, not at all. This is Middle Africa with but anyway, with the Congolese refugees, and because of the Congo and Niger, they've got it's a whole lot of.
This is not a political program.
Sorry,
this is a regenerative.
Well, it's interesting. But we did. I did go out with farmers, and I went to a freaking amazing farm called Babylonstoren in Cape Town, where if you ever go to Cape Town, it's only an hour drive. You've got to go to Babylonstoren. Just look it up. Look it up. Babylonstoren. Yeah, S-T-O-R-E-N.
I think that's a conversation for next time.
Anyway, okay, where are we at?
Thank you. We're good. We're done, Chelsea. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's really interesting to summarise what I've learned from this, that most people, like we were talking with Matt, and we talked about how in hindsight, I suggested to him that in hindsight, what he thought was a really chaotic journey to where he is was actually steps. He went to school till 15, then his dad said, do you want to be a painter decorator? Yes, clunk. He did that till he was 25 and bought a house. Then he decided he wanted to travel. Clunk. He did that until he went to learn, the gardening. Yeah. Clunk. Then he went to series. Clunk. Then he went to his own place, and now he's looking at bringing other people in. And when I said it to him like that, it was like, wow, I hadn't thought of that. Thank you so much. Because he just sees like, oh, my life's been so chaotic. Yeah, but actually it hasn't. Yeah. And you, what's really interesting about you, unlike a lot of people, is that you kind of started off where you fit, but you had to go and
go away from
experience a few other things to come back and go like, oh, actually, I really like it where I came from. I don't need to go somewhere else.
I'd never thought of it like that.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, thank you.
You can put your comments at the bottom of the YouTube.
Pay you later.
Thank you, Chelsea.
Thank you.